every time that intro hits, I'm like, "Oh,
It
we're
is just so
live."
soothing. I'm ready to, like, it's 10 AM my time. I'm ready to go back to bed. Is
Yeah,
it good?
exactly.
Is
This
that
is
the
like
is
the
that the
best thing.
vibe?
Yeah, I'm at 4 PM here, but I'm good. No, it's always fun, right? When we always have these discussions and like, "Oh, no, we have to go live. Let's click." And then we just continue the discussion. That's how this goes.
That's
I'm
we're vibing, right? That's isn't that what the kids say nowadays?
I'm I'm too far away from that, but I'll take it.
Exactly. I'm there too. I am not one of the kids. I'm that Steve Buscemi meme with the skateboard. Hello,
Oh,
fellow
boy. Yeah,
young
exactly.
people.
Yeah, exactly. This is Uncle Brian and Uncle Tim talking to you about rich tags in
Rich
headless
text.
CMSs. And
Tim,
so
did you know that I am probably one of the biggest rich text geeks out there?
really, because I kind of try to stay away from them because
So does
they're
a
so kind of complicated and they almost always do what you need, but the moment it really needs to happen, they tend not to. And so that's also why we have this stream, right? We need you to actually explain us all the things. And because they're different in headless than they are in, let's say, more traditional sense of
Well, but
things.
here's
And
the problem, Tim. Not all headless treats it differently. And that breaks
ah,
the promise of headless in a lot of ways, right?
oh man, the
So
broken promise of headless comes back hunting me all the time. I even wrote a
all the
blog post on it once.
it is very much like it's very easy, right, to break the promises that that headless brings us. But like so real fast, because I'm also like
The
a
geek is
history
coming.
buff.
Here we go. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, rant time, right? Like, that's what I do. I basically just do rants. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
But, like, the idea of rich text and why we call it rich text, right? Because a lot of people who have been in the industry for a little while, would probably refer to it differently, right? They would refer to it as WYSIWYG, which, if you're not old like me, you might not even know what kind of word that is. It's not
I
even a
love
word.
that word.
It is an acronym, right? What you see is what you get, right? WYSIWYG, which sure, yeah. And it dates back to like early CMSs, especially around like WordPress era stuff. And literally what you would see is what you would get, right? You would enter content into this like big field. It would generate HTML in the monolith CMS, pump it out into what the front end that's attached to it, because back then, like, it
It's
wasn't
all the
the
same. Yeah.
and it was what you got, right? But
Is this also the Dreamweaver era where you would build websites like that almost?
to a degree, although I mean, you could definitely consider Dreamweaver itself almost a WYSIWYG editor, since
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
spitting out the HTML code, but maybe bigger than that.
But
For
remember that Photoshop did it too. You had a little slice tool where you
Yep.
could kind of slice it and it would make you HTML, but it wouldn't like extract the text and stuff.
And before Adobe bought Dreamweaver, right? Because Dreamweaver was Macromedia, I believe, before that.
Yes, I remember
Um,
that time.
Before they bought it, they also had Fireworks, which was kind of their own. Like, the only thing I ever used
Yeah.
Dreamweaver or Fireworks for were doing image maps,
Oh yeah,
which
exactly.
dating myself real hard there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Me too.
But image maps were a thing. They were really difficult to deal with. But like Dreamweaver and Fireworks made it actually pretty easy to deal with. But yeah, you could consider that WYSIWYG-esque. Although when I used to have to teach web development and use Dreamweaver, I refused to let my
Mhm.
students use the graphical side of Dreamweaver.
Yeah, exactly. We
Writing
used
code.
it for a bit, but then we just went to code because there was more fun to be had somehow.
Well, and also just
Oh,
I
look,
even
Romina's just said it.
GeoCities.
GeoCities was essentially a big what you see is what you get editor, right?
Yep.
And Lo is right. You did like we could go into FTP, but we probably won't.
The fun thing, right, is almost any stream where I get to talk about history of web, whether that I've done it on like the Compressed FM podcast, like that
Mm,
podcast went off the rails because like we got really into like the old school stuff, but it was a great conversation.
I love this
Um,
thing.
but yeah, it's very much like, I don't know, understanding the history of where we got to where we are
Yeah,
is important. But when we're
exactly.
talking about rich text, right? We came from this era where literally what you saw was what you got. And then the headless era, if you lock in your rich text editor to output just HTML, that doesn't work in places that don't support HTML. It doesn't
Yeah,
work.
exactly.
It doesn't work in a lot of ways. And I think
Yeah.
anyone who's used the old WordPress API, like before Gutenberg, but when they were still like playing with the idea of headless,
Yeah.
like it's just this horrible escaped string of HTML. And that's like I used to run a team at a small agency, and we had our own CMS, and we used Tiny MCE.
Oh,
Uh,
I remember that bad boy.
one of the big players, right? That was
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the WYSIWYG editor. But it was just pure HTML. It was, we stored it as an HTML string in the database and spit it back out.
Yeah, and so this
So,
just unsafe, accessible stuff that you would put in essentially. Dude,
exactly.
I just remembered I worked just before I started at startups. My last agency project was with Adobe AEM,
Yep.
but it was their hybrid Atlas. Oh, let me just say hello to NG. Welcome. And so they had like this, what you see is what you get stuff a little bit, and what you could do in their CMS is kind of drag and drop stuff into columns.
Sure.
And then guess what came out of their Headless API in JSON?
Pure HTML.
Pure HTML
Pure HTML.
in divs. And one output of one page was minimum 5,000 lines. Even if you didn't use these divs, if they were empty, they would come out. It's all this fun stuff about what you see is what you get. What is rich text? Is it layout? How much HTML do you put in? Did you paste it from Word and now you have the most ridiculous HTML in there? Like it's all over the place.
Yeah. Anything that is going to output HTML is a mistake. Um,
Oh, we start off strong today. I like
oh
it.
yeah. Oh yeah. No sugarcoating this. Like it is.
Oh,
It is a
my
problem.
website, my new website uses rich text output HTML from Hygraph. So kids, you can do it. Maybe you
We're going to
shouldn't,
start
but
there
you
today.
can.
When we dive into code, the example that I have that we're going to work through, because when you're prototyping, absolutely no big deal. We
Yeah,
output HTML
exactly.
for you. But it's what the default HTML output is. And that is by no means what you want. And it's absolutely not what you want if you're not building a website with the data coming from Hygraph. Uh,
Exactly. Because that's so cool about headless and rich text is that it's not always for HTML. It might be for, a bus stop digital sign or for a kiosk or for some. I remember building a check-in kiosk for KLM flights,
yeah.
which had data come out and it had IE6 back in the day, but it
Ooh,
was not HTML. It came out differently, and then we had to, but they did edit it in, and what you see is what you get style thing.
yeah.
So there you
And
go.
you want in many situations, you want like bold and italics and all the different little things that you
Mhm.
get out of rich text, but you want to be able to control the output, and you want to be able to.
Exactly.
I'm a big fan of when we talk about headless. I like to talk about remixing. Like obviously, if you've seen me talk about like content federation in the past, I
Yeah.
love talking about remixing. But what rich text and keeping that as data allows you to do is remix it any way you need to, even if you want to. What we're going to do today, render the rich text in two different ways on the same page for very specific reasons. You absolutely can.
Fancy.
You have one piece of data, and then you can use it in multiple ways on the same page, on different pages, wherever it needs to be. But you can control every bit of the output. Or let's say you
Mhm.
wanted to like toss it into make an RSS feed. You might need the output of that to be different.
Oh,
Like
100%. It's
it,
just like simplified or all the styling out of it because it's Atom or whatever you want to call it, or XML or.
yep.
And so maybe with that, that's a lovely bridge. I'm not here
Yeah.
talking for you, but hopefully this fits. Do you want to like explain what that thing means? Like going from I'm just editing, I'm adding bold, and I have a link and I have an image in there, or whatever. Can you explain what it's called when you go from that rich pipe, what you can see on the screen here right now, to this JSON structure? What is that exactly?
So what it is, and I am by no means a computer science person, right? So I'm not that style of geek, but the actual like term that you'd be looking for in terms of if you want to do more research on this is actually an AST. Ooh,
Mhm.
should have re-looked up the acronym for the stream.
You might want to Google it
Yeah,
to
let's
your
do that
own
real fast.
peril,
It is a
perhaps.
style of object tree, so that
AST
we can get
rich
the
tag.
actual.
Oh, there we
Everyone wants to
go.
convert it. Where's the definition? There we go. It is an abstract syntax tree, and it's just a way of storing data in a proper way that makes it more easily accessible by code in various ways. And so what it amounts to is all of this lovely information in this content field, right? We've
Yeah.
got a paragraph that has a bold tag. We have a link inside of a UL. We have a headline, an H2, all sorts of stuff in there. When we go to, say, our API playground, let me get rid of some of this real fast. And we look at the content and we say we want the JSON implementation of that. It comes out as
this
this.
is AST, right?
Yep. So each of our posts has a content object. The content object allows you to pull in, right? We could come down here. We could actually get this as HTML, right? I play this again and let's hide the JSON. And here's that.
Can you zoom
string
in
of
just a
HTML.
tiny bit?
Yes.
By the way, if that works. This interface might make that a little. Yeah, there we go.
Yep. I can adjust some things so we can see it a little bit better. But
Yeah,
like here's
okay,
the
so
HTML representation.
Yeah.
And it's not bad, right? Paragraph, strong tag. Here's an actual anchor. The anchor has a title, like by default. A lot of decent stuff in that. But it's not necessarily ideal. And so we can actually take it and re-represent it as JSON, as data. And so we have
because
here.
you might have some very specific accessibility rules or anything like that where you want control.
Yep.
Or you just might not like what comes out as HTML.
Or we have a video on the YouTube channel where I add Tailwind classes to everything, right? Because you could toss
exactly.
a pros tag around it with their typography stuff, but maybe you have very specific classes you want to add to everything, and you want that in your HTML. So when we look at it here, we've got a children array that's directly on that JSON that actually represents each of the items inside of that as an object, and then if it has more things inside of it, it goes deeper, right? So when we look at it, that first paragraph, which was one paragraph of text with one bold inside of it, is a type paragraph, and then it has multiple children. The children are the very first word in there, which is just the word A, and then we go into another child, which has more information, which is it's bold equals true, and the text inside of it is content. There's no children inside of that, so we don't have to go further. And then we go to the next child, which is just the rest of the paragraph. So now I know in this representation, I have one big paragraph with one other tag inside with content split on either side of it. So there's a lot of things I can do with that. And we have some tools to help you get through it, because you don't necessarily want to build your own AST like tree traversal JavaScript library.
Yeah, it's a little intense to do that yourself.
Yep. So
we like doing that though, but it's pretty intense. Yeah.
I don't like doing it. I don't think abstractly in data. I'm a visual person in a lot of ways. Like my background was in design first and foremost. But you see here, we have all of this, and we can use it to then transform it into HTML or transform it into any number of things. So what we can maybe do is kind of go into the example that we're working with today. This is just a very, very simple like blog layout. It actually mirrors a little bit of our Next.js blog, which we have as a starter. But we got 2 blog posts, and inside of it, you can see we have all that HTML. So the rendering that you saw inside of Hygraph, here is that thing with the bold tag. And right now in the code, which I already have some set up, we're using 11 because I want to show it in as vanilla JavaScript as possible so that we can kind of see how all this works. What's happening currently is I'm actually making a fetch request to Hygraph, right? We're using GraphQL request. Here's my endpoint. You should probably put it in an environment variable, but that's not a big deal for this. And then basically I'm looking to get all my posts. I'm getting the slug, the title, and that content. And you can see that I'm getting the JSON, but I'm also getting the HTML. And then all I do is I export that out, and that's what 11D wants. We won't get too far deep into 11D territory, but what ends up happening is we go over to our post, and I get the data in this front matter, and then I spit out whatever I need to as template language code.
So for now, we're using the HTML from that post. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I wanted to like use JSON, I come back over and like,
it's just an object now.
It's just an object.
You can use JSON stringify to show people the JSON, I guess.
I'd have to I'd have to code that. That's not a built-in filter in
Oh
Eleven.
yeah, in Eleven you probably have to make like a filter with a pipe, like in the
Yes,
template
so that would
language.
be liquid or nunjux or that sort of thing. And one of them actually has it, but I'm not going to like. Yes,
Not for now. It's fine.
I think I'm in liquid. I think liquid's the one that has
It
it.
might actually work.
Oh wait, that was HTML. I need JSON.
Jason.
No, I think it's if I look at my
It just
inspector,
says
yeah,
no.
it's erroring.
Yeah, it's just not. Yeah, exactly.
It is
It's
not. It's not a
fine.
built-in filter there. I have built that filter before. It's a super easy
Yeah, I
filter
can
to build.
imagine. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we go back to object, but we don't want the JSON. We want to roll our own version of this. So what I want to actually do in our stream today, and I think it's totally reasonable in the next 45 minutes, is I want to convert all of this.
Famous
And I want.
last words.
I know,
I'm
right? I
sorry.
have cheat sheets, Tim. I have cheat sheets
Yeah,
on this
I
monitor
know.
over here. We'll be
You're
fine. I
good.
have all the code. In fact, if anyone wants, I don't have the GitHub page open anymore. Let me pull up my notes real fast. If anyone wants to see the finished code, it's not as pretty as what's currently here, but I'm posting in chat from the Hygraph account.
Yeah. And I also put it here as well, so you can have a look there.
That is like this proof of concept. We're going to build a table of contents for our blog posts based on the headlines. So we need a few things for that. We need each of our headlines to have an ID, and we need to build a table of contents. Both of which, if this were pure HTML, would be a pretty big pain, right? I could actually take this HTML. I could use a JavaScript library like Cheerio. I don't know if you're familiar with Cheerio.
Oh, dude, there you're taking me back.
Cheerio is an NPM package that takes an HTML string and then treats it like jQuery. So you can select.
I was just going to say, doesn't have, I think it has the jQuery parser for HTML in it. What's the name again?
You use everything, right? The $, parentheses, all of that. Like, it is jQuery syntax. I love it. It's good. You shouldn't use it. You don't need to use it, but it would still be a pain to grab all
DOM
of that.
traversal in Node.js in memory. That's what it does. So we could do that and then find all the headlines and then in memory create an extra string with links, put it above. It's pretty painful, but kind of fun to do. But don't do it, please.
I've certainly done that sort of thing before. Like I've built my own static site generator, and that's kind of some things you have to do when you do that. Because who hasn't built a static site generator? Who hasn't built their own CMS? It's just what we do as devs. However, we're not going to do any of that today because all the stuff that we have is ready to go. And what we're going to use is one of Hygraph's rich text packages. So I'm going to link this in chat as well.
So while you do that, what's super interesting here is that you don't have to write your own AST interpreter and write all your HTML yourself. You just use the one that Hygraph built, use that, and then only adapt the things you want to change. Maybe you want to change the links. That was one of the questions actually in our community the other day. Like, how do I change this? Hey, I see enters around it. Can I change that? Well, if you just change the link, there you go. So we give you everything and you only change what you want. But today we're going to go slightly deeper because we're going to interpret that JSON, make it just render the thing, and then add stuff on top to link to the subheadings.
And so we're going to take this in phases, right? So first and foremost, in this package, there is a pure like AST to HTML renderer, which is what we're going to use today because it is the very basic, right? You could use this in any JavaScript framework. We also do have a pure React version as well. You get a React component. Many of the things we're going to do work the same way. You just pass it into a component instead of passing it into a JavaScript function. And then there's also the ability to get your types. Obviously, if you're using TypeScript, we're not going to do that today. And then if you need to take HTML and convert it back into AST, there's a package in there as well, because you don't want to do that either. That is a terrible thing.
Oh yeah, that's probably harder because HTML is not strict. That's why XHTML died, because HTML is pragmatic. It's liberal. It's very complicated to work with.
But it's a beautiful thing. Don't get me started on HTML. We'll just talk about HTML the rest of the time.
Yeah, be careful.
So that's there. Right. But the little bit of homework I did beforehand is actually my package.json. You'll actually see I've already installed the rich text to HTML renderer. So you just run npm install Hygraph CMS rich text HTML renderer, and you get it. Same for the React one. You would just have it be a rich text React renderer, right?
You have Vue as well, by the way. Just pointing that out because I love Vue.
Let's see. Yeah, we have an example of Vue, but I don't think we actually have.
It's not
an actual component piece. But
right.
this would be how you use the HTML renderer to make view work.
Sure.
Yep. So the first thing that we need to do is, instead of just having our posts come back through as just the pure data that's coming out of Hygraph, we actually need to transform the data to do that. So I could
Yes.
do it in line in my export down here. And again, this is some of the syntax like in this file is like what Eleventy wants. It's actually a common JS package. They're reworking it into ESM modules now. But before we do that, I'm actually going to write a function to do all of it for us, keep things a little bit cleaner, keep it a little bit tidier. So I'm going to create a function just out here in the world. I'm going to call it add content. It could really be anything. And I'm going to pass into that. Actually, it needs to be an async function.
Oh, yeah, because it somehow has to await something.
Yep. And we need the post. And then we're going to do things to the post. The post being, I should turn off. Let me turn off GitHub Copilot.
So why is this an async function? Because it's not doing like Ajax calls or stuff, or is it just slow?
It's to keep the build process as fast as possible. We're going to do like, there are 2 posts in this one, right? But we're going to do it literally for every single post. So if I've got thousands of posts, I want to not block the thread.
So you want to do one, then the next, then the next, then the next.
Well, and I want it all to be happening behind the scenes too. We're just going to await all this.
Sure.
Yeah, it'll
Oh,
end
yeah,
up
cool.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the nice thing is, Eleventy in the data
it's
files,
all on build, right? It's kind of nice.
It is all 100% on build. That's the thing about Eleventy. We're building HTML, we're sending it to a CDN, and that's it.
So quick tip, kids,
Yep.
if you do this in Next or Nuxt or SvelteKit, don't do this at runtime in the client, because you're going to send a pretty big bundle and a CPU hungry piece of code to your users. Do it in SSR or on build like this with Eleventy.
Yes. Yeah. This is definitely one of those times where your server or your build process should handle. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, because again, you're only dealing when you hit that page. If you hit that route, you're only dealing with one post at that point. This is just with Eleventy, we get all of our posts at the beginning, do it all because we're building.
Exactly.
In your various front end frameworks nowadays, you could potentially do it. You want it to be SSR or build time preferably. All right. So the thing that we're going to do here first is that we need to take the content that we get from the post, that JSON content, and we're just going to start by passing it into the function that we get. So before anything else, since I've installed that package, I need the AST to HTML converter, right? So we're going to grab from rich text to HTML renderer the AST to HTML string method, and we're going to use that to convert everything. So in my add content function here, the first thing we need to do is grab that I turned off Copilot, but
it's still on, it seems.
I don't know. We'll just
But it's telling you exactly what to do, it seems. That's pretty cool.
It's telling me the thing I don't want to do right now.
Oh, really? It's the wrong way around.
I don't want to mutate my object. I want to I want to keep everything clean, but also I'm going to want to do more stuff with what I'm getting. So we'll start by just getting a const, and that's going to be from our post. We've got the content.json, but we actually want to go one step deeper in that, because I know that we have that children array.
Oh, right? Yeah, exactly.
We're going to be working with our children, right? It's bring your kids to work day today. Const content equals that. There we go. So we've got this new.
Right, so you have to do one step in.
Yes. Which again, you don't have to do this. You can do things in one-liners more often. But I'm just going to call this const. I'm going to start by calling it HTML, and we're going to await the function, which is the AST to HTML string. And then don't listen to Copilot here, everyone. That's not what we want. We pass this an object, and the object is the content. It'll also have renderers and a couple other things as we go forward. But to start with, we're going to pass it our content. And just for the explicit nature, I'm going to say content : content. In JavaScript, I could just say content and it would infer that properly. But we have a property named content. Yeah. It needs the array of children.
Exactly.
I was reading chat.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah, me too. This is super cool. Thanks, Nimit, for putting this stuff on.
This is absolutely the right way of doing it. You can
Exactly.
use HTML that we output. You absolutely should be doing it with JSON. It's a little extra work, but it's going to give you flexibility.
I'm hoping, Nimit, you followed it here.
It does exist in the docs. It's great.
Exactly.
All right. And then all we should have to do at this point is I want to return back out of this. It's actually kind of helping right now. I do want to get all the things I had from the post. So
Okay,
everything
yeah,
that came in, I'm going to put back out. But then I also want to, and I'm actually going to ignore what it's saying here. I want just an HTML. I want the HTML to be in there. And later I'm going to have something else. So I need to ignore that part of my cheat sheet.
but
So now
HTML already exists, right? So do you
it
override
doesn't
it?
already exist. What it currently exists in the thing is post content HTML.
Content. All right. You're right. Sorry. All right.
Oh, no
I'm
worries.
learning as we go.
It's a great question. There are some confusing aspects when naming's
Exactly.
hard. All right. So now what I need to do is I need to take all the posts that I get from this and I need to run it over this. And again, I don't want to mutate. I want to say const. It's trying to help me, but yeah, posts with content.
How is it understanding this so
It's not.
well?
This is wrong. Ignore Copilot.
Oh, sorry.
It's trying its best, but
Exactly.
it's Copilot. It doesn't actually know this. And then we're going to await. We're going to take posts and we're going to map over that. Now it knows what's going on. We're going to map over it using our add content function, right? And mapping is going to take every item in the array, run it through this function, and output that into this new variable. Again, we don't want to mutate the posts array. We want to create a new array that we can then
Right.
export. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to export that instead of posts.
Shouldn't you await this function?
Let's see.
It's an
No,
async
because
function, right?
we are awaiting, and this is, perhaps it doesn't actually need to be an async function up here.
Yeah,
Now
because
that I'm thinking
if this
about
is
it.
an async function, I understand GitHub Copilot now, because you have to do a promise all to await everything in a map.
Yeah. There are problems with that. I wrote this code 8-9 months ago, actually. There were issues with that. And I think they were 11D issues.
Oh, really? Well,
I'm
let's
trying to
just
remember.
continue and see.
Yeah,
Right now, it's
been
an
forever.
async function. It shoots off, and it doesn't wait for it. Who cares? If it works,
Yeah.
it works.
Exactly. And I think there's some magic behind the scenes in 11D that's taking care of that too.
Oh,
Don't quote me
really?
on that, but I think that's the case.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Been a bit for me. I'll have to go back and research. I'm gonna write this up as a blog post, so I'll make sure that I think about that for the blog post.
Exactly. Cool.
Yeah, so we've got post with content, and that is now what we're going to output from the data file. And then inside of our post.html, I'm going to double check something real fast. If I can remember how to use this over here, just make sure. Yeah. So what 11D does is it doesn't actually care about what I call this return statement, right? It just cares about what my file is named, and it actually creates in the global data layer a variable called posts. So
Oh, really?
inside
So
this,
there's some
nothing
black
actually has to
magic going
change.
on.
What's that?
There's some black magic in 11T for this. It's nice. It helps you.
It is by default. It wants in the global data to name the variable based on the file, which I like. I'm an 11D stan. But we do need to change this, right? This is no longer what we want. This is the HTML that's coming from Hygraph. What we want is that new piece of data that we added to our object called HTML. And then we come back over and nothing has changed. And that is absolutely as it should be. I'm going to double check that we didn't error. Yeah, cool.
Wow. I'm amazed this async function just deals with that. But there might be some magic behind the scenes then.
Again, like 11D is taking care of some things behind the scenes there.
That's nice. Cool.
There was weirdness in the way that 11D dealt with async functions. And so that's why a lot of this exists. But like, this isn't cool yet, right? I wrote all of this. I wrote how many lines? 10 lines of code, 11 lines of code, right? All to do what I got out of the box already. That's obviously not what we're here for, right? Like, let's not write more code to do the same thing. Let's now expand that so that we can do more stuff. So the next thing that we need to do is we want each of our headlines, requirements, project setup, etc. I'm going to add an ID to the HTML, and I'm actually going to wrap it in an anchor tag, because a lot of these, like when you build like a table of contents anyway, like if you go to our docs right now, you hover over a headline and you can click and you can get a link directly to it. It helps with sharing. It helps with like long pages, a lot of things.
Yeah,
So we'll start
exactly.
with that, right? We will re-render each headline in our data.
So I'm just sending something to Nimit, but I'm not sure when I do a chat, it actually goes to LinkedIn.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
so Nimit, if you actually open source your project, feel free to join our stream and present what you've done. We love that stuff. That's what I wrote to you, but I think it went to YouTube rather than to LinkedIn.
It works.
Sorry to interrupt.
But yeah, I'd love to see it too. Just even if you don't want to come on stream, I want to see it. Share it.
Oh, we 100% want to see it.
But everyone wants to see it too.
Actually, we want everybody to learn about the cool stuff you're building.
Yep. All right.
All right.
So next up, I actually have some cheat codes that we're going to use just for simplicity. So what we need to do is we actually need to go through the data that we're getting back, and we need to identify the children that are one of the headers. So all this knowledge is also available in the documentation and in that GitHub repo. You can find all the information that we're kind of going through. But one of the things I know about the structure, and I learned this because I didn't read the docs first, but I learned it because I'm a console log developer. I console logged the entire array. I found what I needed to know, and I kind of went forward with that. But I've created a couple of little helper functions. And the first one is this idea of, is a child one of the headers? And you could do this in line, but it's kind of a long like or statement, right? If the node, which we're passing in, the child that we're passing in, each child has a type. We saw it in the data, right? Type paragraph, type. Let's look at that real fast. Let's go.
Can you like console log it and then have a look at it?
It's cleaner here. So
there you go.
That first child is a type paragraph. Inside of it, it's just some text, but it has a bold. But let's go and find here, type bulleted list, type heading 2. Here's our first heading.
There we go.
Right? So each of our headings is heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6. Roughly equates to H1 through H6, right? So what we can do
why doesn't AST do H1 or P or LI for this? Why is it named like this?
That's an absolutely wonderful question.
It's just only like, let's add a bit of opinion here. Why not?
Yeah.
It feels like GraphQL a little.
I don't know an answer, although I would say when you get into all the tags, right? Type P sounds weird. Like if you're just looking at it, or type A, it's not a great look at that point. Like it's not very explicit. If you're just looking at the data as a human, it becomes a little bit more obfuscated, a little bit harder to understand.
I can imagine if you want to go from this to, let's say, a Word document or something or some other format, then suddenly this starts making a little bit more sense.
And again, this also corresponds, I think, I'm speaking before I look, to look at this.
There it says heading 2. Yeah.
So it's also a little bit easier when you're looking in here, what are the things in the rich text field and how do they equate?
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. That's what this little teeny function does, is it checks that type on each of the children that I'm going to pass to it, and checks to see, is it heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Cool.
If yes, return true, right? And we're good. So I'm going to, at the top of my file, we're going to check, we're going to bring that in, right? So const is header require that file, right?
Yep.
I just want that function. Again, this is just to keep my code a little cleaner. And because I've got even more than a cheat sheet, I've got cheat codes.
We like it.
Yep. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take, sorry, I'm having to make sure I'm doing this out of order to the way that the stuff actually goes. I want to check through the content with IDs, or sorry, the content, and I want to filter it based on is header. So I'm going to take my content and I'm going to find const content with headers. Actually, no, I don't need to do this. I'm sorry. I'm getting all out of whack here.
They're all over the place.
I know. What we actually need to do is, before we get to that, that's how we're going to actually create the next thing of stuff. We need to specially render our headers. And we actually have things built in for that. So I'm going to create custom renderers for each of our headlines. So out here, I'm going to make a new function, const renderers, and that's going to be an object. And for each of our headings, we're going to actually use a new set of content here, right? So I want my headline to now also have an ID on it, which we're going to have to add in a second. And we want to wrap each of these. Let's do a little bit of VS Code wizardry here.
Oh, magic.
An anchor tag that has an href that goes to # interpolation of
the ID, I guess.
ID.
Yeah.
Yep. So we did that for all 6 of those. But Brian, you might be asking, where do those IDs come from? That's why I was getting confused with my cheat sheet. We need to give an ID to all of our nodes. So I had this other cheat code, which is using the UUID package,
exactly.
which just creates specific IDs over and over again. That's all it's here for, is to give me IDs. So let me grab that as well.
Isn't this like one of the most used NPM packages ever?
Anytime I need an ID, I use it, and I assume that's the same for almost everyone else.
Basically everyone, yeah, exactly.
So I'm going to add that function up here, and then we're going to map over the content, and we're going to have a content with IDs. So we're going to take that, and yeah, I think that's actually what I want. Let me double check.
Yeah, so we are not going to mutate anything, and we're just going to keep it clean all the time.
Exactly. Never mutate when you can just rewrite. So now
I always mutate though. I need to learn this. I always mutate.
You certainly can, but side effects. You never know when you're going to need the clean data.
True.
So now, instead of passing in here for our content, we're actually going to pass in the content with IDs, which all this does is it literally goes through every single node, and as data, it returns back everything that was on that node as well as a new ID.
Oh, so every node, also the bold tag, everything for now.
I could check for headers, but like,
no, that's fine. It doesn't really matter, I guess, for now.
It's super fast. It doesn't really matter in terms of this style performance anyway. Like, this is also it's all build time. If I were doing this in front end code, right, potentially even server code, I would absolutely only run that. But it's data traversal. Like, computers are good at that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's on build, so who cares?
Yep. So we're going to pass in as our content. This is why I explicitly said content before. The content is now content with IDs. And we're going to pass as our renderers. You can see all of our packages are typed. So renderers, we know exists. And that is going to be, again, I'll be explicit, the renderers variable that we put up here. By default, we have a renderer for every type that you get from our rich text. So all we're doing here is we are overriding some of these things with our new renderer. So theoretically,
I have a pretty spicy question though.
Oh no.
Why is it called H1 now and not header 1?
Don't ask that question, Tim. I don't have a good answer for you on that question. Sorry, in fact, I'm pretty sure when I wrote this the first time, this is where I broke the first thing.
Oh, 100%. I can imagine.
I think it's
variables with dashes suck.
You cannot do this, right? You cannot do.
You cannot. No, you cannot. Exactly. Well, with quotes around it, but it kind of sucks.
Yes, and it becomes. I mean, consistency is important. Would it be better that way?
Tedious, you know.
Yes, but like, naming is also hard.
Yes.
So theoretically, there are no errors. So we should be able to come back. Oh, that's kind of okay. I got a small issue somewhere in my actual HTML. You know what I didn't do? Remember, everyone, when you open a tag in HTML, you need to close it. So let's do our magic VS Code. I'm holding down the Option key on Mac here, which I assume you would hold down the Alt key?
Alt or something?
But it lets you basically select multiple lines and do the exact same thing on every line. And I also need to come back and finish typing my my anchor
tag. Link.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
I do have
all sorts of things went wrong there. There we go.
Oh wait. So for the header one, you give the header you give the header the ID, and you add a link around the header itself specifically,
This is for this
right?
specific piece of functionality, right? We don't need this for the
Okay.
table of contents. What we
Mhm.
need for the table of contents is ID equals the ID that we gave it.
Exactly. Okay.
And
Okay,
you can
cool.
do this in any number of ways. I'm
This is
using
like a link to
UUID for
itself
simplicity,
almost.
but you could also you could slugify each of the headlines.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
sure.
probably the better way of going. But like in 11D, I'd have to do. It's more complex than we need for this. We're just adding
So
IDs to everything.
essentially, in the simplest form, you wouldn't need the A tag around the child inside the header, right? It's just to be able to click it and it's nice.
Exactly. And really
Okay.
what we might do, right, instead, if we were doing something fancy, would be we'd have the headline and we'd have like, the like SVG icon for link,
Oh,
right?
yeah, exactly. Like
And then
the
we would only show
outward
that on
link thing.
hover and like, there's all sorts of
Yeah.
like cool fancy stuff we could do there.
You could do
But
some
for
clever stuff,
simplicity,
but yeah, this makes sense. Thanks.
yeah. So now all these are linked, right? So you can check in the URL up here. These are the URLs, the IDs that
Yeah.
we provided, and they jump you down, right? They're jump links. So now I could share
Nice
this
and
link
cool.
if it weren't localhost and get it wherever.
Yeah, awesome.
So at its simplest, we have created renderers for every headline, and you could, if you needed a custom renderer for ULs, right? You could create a custom renderer for ULs.
And so
Uh,
what else other than ID and children could you get back in a renderer? Anything of the whole DOM node?
so you're not getting a DOM node at that point, right? You're
Oh,
getting
no,
data.
not yet. Not yet. It's
and you're
just
and you're
properties of
and
the
you're
JSON.
translating it to a string, right?
Yeah.
So this renderer is an HTML renderer. So we don't
Mhm.
have one that would render to some other, like to XML. So if you
Yeah,
needed that, you could write a custom renderer for each node, and you'd have in the AST to HTML, you'd have a renderer that would work for this.
sure.
Um,
Okay, thanks.
yeah, and that's kind of how it works also in the React one, right, behind the scenes. So yeah, any of the pieces of data you can create a custom renderer for.
Because I'm thinking like this children property here in the
Yeah.
header one function, for example. I'm imagining that is JSON.
Yes. So what's happening
So
here, and this is where it gets complicated when you code this yourself, code an AST translator yourself.
exactly, yes. I'm
The
going there now.
children then runs through the AST to HTML converter again. There will
Oh,
be a type on
yes.
that, and then if that type matches one of these renderers, it does that. But that one also has children, and if that children is more than text and has a type, it runs through it again and again
Oh, so
and
that's
again,
crazy. You send
all
a
the way down.
string,
Yep,
and that string is interpreted by this AST render as a bit of HTML and a bit of JSON, and it takes out the JSON and then
does it
recursively
again.
runs over that. That's crazy, but
It
lovely for us, though.
When I thought about how to build this, which we had when I started, we had this package, and I've thought about this multiple times, right? Like through
Mm.
the years at various companies. It literally broke my brain for a day and a half. Like I wrote something that kind of worked.
Yeah,
Uh, whew, there's a lot of thought that has to go into it, and yeah, you have to recursively run it, and yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. This basically abstracts all that complexity and says, when I see a type, do this, pass it to children. Like if you don't
exactly.
pass that children, like if we want every headline to be the same, right? Well, that's
Yeah,
typo.
exactly. Then
But yeah,
it just doesn't do anything. Yeah.
exactly. Well, it would do something. It would render an
Hi.
H1 with the ID, with the anchor tag that has the link to the ID with the word hi.
Exactly. So
So if I
this is
really
kind of
wanted to
nice
change
for
things, I could.
yeah, true. But this is kind of nice for the React folks because they always send children to things. It's kind of
Yes.
fine. It
Yeah.
feels
Well,
the same.
and when you think about it, when you're thinking about this sort of thing, like what React is doing at that point is basically recursively rendering things. Like
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
pass the children in and then you do something with the children. Sometimes the children are more React components, right?
Yes.
It just
Sometimes
it
it's
was it
HTML.
monkeys all the way down, like or turtles
Yeah.
all the way down, whatever it is. But yeah,
Okay. Let's not go into how we render React.
let's not go and let's not talk too much about the actual AST traversal
Yeah,
because
because
that
it's for the nerds, but this works.
yeah,
Show them.
you want somebody else to talk about that, not me.
Exactly.
But this is how you work
Yeah.
it. All right. So this is stage 2, right? Stage 1, we got our content re-represented with HTML that we could then customize. Stage
Yep.
2, we customize all the headlines to have ID. We customize every node inside of our data with an ID. And then we surface that ID on the custom H1 through H6 tags that we render with an anchor tag around it and an ID on it. So when you're building a table of contents on a page, all you're really doing is providing a series of anchor tags, and those anchor tags equate to one of the IDs on the page. This is just like basic HTML. When you have an href that has a £, it looks for an ID on the page. So as long as there's a matching ID, the browser will automatically push the user down to it. And that's the basics of what we want for our table of contents.
Yeah.
So let me go back to my cheat sheet, because this is where things could get complicated, but I also have more cheat codes available as well. All right. So we have our content with IDs. We are currently translating that into HTML. I am no longer going to touch this. We don't need to mess with this HTML anymore. What we need is to render from our data another set of HTML for our table of contents.
Yeah.
So what we can do is, and this is where we get into other stuff, right? Where we get into the header function that I included earlier. And for those of you who missed it when I got myself confused, I've required in this is header function from our utility file, which again was one of my cheat codes, that's just looking at that type and checking if it's heading 1 through heading 6. And if it is, returning true so that we can filter based on that. So what we'll do is I want to get all my headers. So const headers, and it's really going to try to help me here. And I think it's almost right. It's almost right. I want to actually use it on content with IDs though. So we're going to get the content with IDs because I need that ID, right?
Yep.
Content without IDs, I can't link the two together because I don't have that connector. So content with IDs, we want to filter through that. And then we're going to use the is header. So this is going to...
Sorry, go on.
This is going to look through all the children and only return children that match heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5, heading 6 as their type. So it's going to look through all of that, filter based on that OR statement that is in the return statement for this, and then return back an array. And just so we can see this, I will actually console log develop here. We'll return that, and theoretically, here are all the children.
Oh, there we go.
For the 2 posts. Here's 1 post worth of children, I guess, and here's the other one, right?
Wow.
So 2 posts. This one has 3 heading 2s. The other one has a whole bunch. So
the magic of filter.
At its simplest, I can now create a set of anchor tags to do this. However, I'm going to take it one step further because I forgot I wrote a special NPM package for this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fancy.
I, again, cheat codes, wrote table of contents JSON. I think I wrote that. Maybe I finally found one that worked for me. Sorry, no, nested TO. You can see I tried a lot. The one that's still in the 0.1 release, right? Not this one, which somebody else wrote but didn't actually meet my needs. This is actually going to look through all of this and create table of JSON that I need for my table of contents, because that's actually super complicated, right? Because every section, the data that we get returned is not nested in that way. So I get these headings, and you can see from my data, like 3 heading 2s, no big deal. But if I want to indent my code, I need to check and say, all right, here's heading 2, here's heading 3. Heading 3 should be indented underneath heading 2, right? I'm creating that sort of flow through my table of contents. And that's actually, as it turns out, complicated and not honestly super easy. If you want, I actually have in here also this kind of file where I started writing it, and I wrote it, and all this moved into that thing. But like, yeah, you don't.
So you're kind of just parsing it and looking at levels, and then
exactly, and then returning a nested version of it is basically what's happening there.
Okay, so all this is just to get nested 2, 3, 4, stuff like that.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So the next thing that we need is we want to actually run it through that. So let's see. We've got const. We're going to want the JSON. And we're going to take that headers that we get. We're going to map over it. We're going to take the header. And then we're going to return back. And I actually need all this in a parentheses because I'm doing an implicit.
You're returning it. Yeah, exactly.
Oops.
The syntax sugar of new JavaScript is so nice.
It is very nice. It can be confusing if you don't understand it. So in this case, I'm taking all the header data and I'm using the spread function, right? I'm spreading that back in so that it's not one layer deep. And then I have to go and look at that and create the text for it, right? So this is actually going to, we'll console log this as well. So now, something's not quite right. But you can see I'm reshaping this, right, in a different way.
Exactly. You're just adding the text now, but it somehow doesn't find the value of the first child.
Yes. Looking real fast to see how I broke this. Content with IDs, filter is header, headers JSON, headers.map. We take the header. It is not value. This is, again, everyone, GitHub Copilot is super helpful in many ways. Don't believe what you read.
Do you think if this was typed that it would have worked? That it would have told you?
Maybe, but I'm also mutating, right? Like I'm changing right
Yeah,
now. So
that's
I'm creating a new set of types, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
See now we've got that. And again, I'm making something else for us to render. I'm gonna actually run this through that function that I created. So instead of that, we're actually gonna go and we're gonna say, I want the TOC array, because I honestly don't want to generate this in JavaScript. So I'm going to say await our generate JSON, which is that function that I'm just now including from that, right? So generate JSON from that package that I wrote, and pass into that my headers JSON, right? Header JSON. And so that's going to generate the JSON that I need to render in my front end. And I've got more cheat codes for that too. So now instead of doing any more HTML and JavaScript, which is actually an anti-pattern to 11D, 11D wants most of this done in your templates. So that's why I'm doing it in this way. If I were doing this in React or in like Next or Next or Vue, I would probably do this in JavaScript. I would take this and I would render it a different way. But what I actually want is I want to pass that new array into my data that I'm passing to 11D. All right, so we go back into post.html. And again, I have a cheat code, which I'll actually walk you through real fast. I have an include, which is my TOC include. And this is actually going to be a recursive template, which you can do in 11D. And it is much more the 11D way than, say, generating all of this in JavaScript. And so what I'm doing here is I'm creating an unordered list. I am looping through all of the items that I'm getting through on that first level. I'm assigning a length to it. There's some behind-the-scenes stuff going on here. And then I'm creating a list item. That list item has the anchor to the headline. And then if the length of the children in the array, which again, I'm nesting all of this in a new set of stuff, if it is greater than 0, I am going to then do the include again. So I'm going to include.
Let this be a lesson to just use JavaScript, because you have to learn all this. To me, it's such a levity.
If you're an 11D developer, though, this is way more comfortable than the JavaScript in Node, because this is all closer to. I worked in a syntax like this. What year is this? 15 years ago. I've been working in a syntax like this for over 15 years, because this is Liquid. It's also Nunjuck syntax. Those are both based on the Jinja 2 templating language from Django, which was my first big templating language. And so I've used this forever. 11D has it available. If you are a Shopify developer, you're probably familiar with this stuff, right? If you know Liquid, you take data and you loop through it in your sleep. So again, it's all about what you're used to. And absolutely, if I were doing this in React or something else, I would write this in JavaScript instead.
Yeah, I would say probably JSX or TSX is the closer to JavaScript, because if you do this with Vue, it kind of looks like this, to be fair. Yeah.
Okay, fair.
It's almost not the same, but it has the same vibe. Let's just say template languages are always opinionated in some way. They have to be.
So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use 11D syntax again. So I've got that file in my includes. I want to include it, which is a template tag that I have available in 11D. Stop helping me, GitHub Copilot. I need to say include the file toc.html. We were able to implicitly know that it's an includes. That's an 11 piece of functionality.
Okay, cool.
I can change that if I want to, but it requires configuration. And then I want to, because I know this include is looking for something called level, I want to pass it a level parameter, and I want that to be the TOC array that I'm passing into this, right? TOC array. So if I've done all my homework properly, because again, I knew that we had an hour, I'll save this in. And here are all the H2s.
Yo.
Which I can click on. And then if we want to see it more complex, let's go back to the home page. Let's go to my Content Federation blog post.
What?
And here they are nested.
This is crazy. Dude,
So
you
here
did
are
it in
all like the
56
H3s.
minutes.
Yep.
Time box king.
Yep. Preparation. I think Nikki said
yeah,
that.
exactly.
But here's the takeaway, right? This is obviously, this table of contents thing is a more complex idea. And it's really complex because nesting. If all these were H2s, super easy, right? I would have just used the regular renderer for that. But because I wanted to show nesting, because I wanted to show the slightly more complex thing, we do that.
That's cool.
So the thing I want everyone to kind of take away here is that not only can you take the JSON that you get from Hygraph's rich text, or really any rich text that has data built in, right? Has some sort of AST built in. You can redo any of the rendering to HTML, right? So in this case, the thing that we did was we took every headline and we converted it to have an ID and an anchor tag around it. But then also, you can use it as pure data in whatever NPM package you choose to use it in. Whatever data need you have for your content, you can pass it in as data and be good to go. So what we did here, right, is I remapped this to what my NPM package needed. Whatever NPM package is out there that you want to use for whatever purpose, not table of contents, for whatever purpose you've got. You remap the data that you get, because it's pure data, super easy to work with in JavaScript, and pass it to the package, and the package can do whatever it needs to do. In this case, it generated a new array for us that 11 could deal with, but you could do whatever you wanted with that data. If you wanted to pass it to React Native, you could do that and do some random stuff there. If you wanted to pass it to some sort of function and a serverless function that used like Adobe PDF generation, you could generate PDFs out of the data that you got in whatever way you need to. You can just pass this data around in any way you need to.
Yeah, I've used this stuff if it's a slightly simpler version, as if I get an image out of this thing, I don't want the default image renderer from whatever this HT to HTML package. I actually want to lazy load the image and do a bunch of fun stuff with Cloudinary.
Yep.
So I have a function to just grab a source of an image and do a bunch of things to that image tag that says loading equals lazy, or fetch this through the Cloudinary CDN instead. But I've also had to do it when I was working in a Next.js project when it was still 12. So it was like a Jamstack site. Well, Next has this really cool link tag that actually prefetches a bunch of pages for you while you rehydrate the page. But when you get a link out of rich text, it's just a normal A tag. So what I did is actually, with this functionality, I made it into a Next.js link tag. So when hydration happens, all my links would be prefetched and everything was much faster. And so you can use it for these like day-to-day things also.
Exactly. Like if you wanted to, I'm trying to remember if our React, actually, no, it wouldn't, because it's not pure React, right?
Exactly.
The React renderer, right, is not going to give you that link functionality in Next. And so if you need that, you can then have all the anchors. You can do a type check, get the anchors in that array, and render them to the link to do the prefetching, just like Tim was saying for Next as well.
There are some gotchas there, of course, because especially back then, what I ran into is like, okay, when does it hydrate, and when do you do this thing? Do you do it on the server, so then your HTML is created and pushed to the front, and then it hydrates and it starts prefetching, or does that happen in like a more mixed, like with Nuxt back in the day? Especially, it was you never really knew when it was SSR and when it was client. It was kind of mixed, and so in Nuxt I didn't manage to get it done, but in Next I did. Nowadays, Next is closer to Next, so it's all like server render when you choose. But Those kind of things are like the real use cases that you might see every day versus when you want to do something like super special like Bryan just did. But we've had recently in our awesome community where people are starting asking questions about rich text, things like, when I paste this in rich text A, I want to get that same content rendered into HTML and then back into AST and then go into another rich text field. That is, for example, if you have something very specific that you're dealing with, that might need to happen. And you can use this stuff for that. Right? It's quite flexible.
Well, and
I'm not saying it's easy, but it's flexible.
The real interesting thing for me on that was not only that was somebody using the rich text renderer, not on the website, literally using the app SDK in Hygraph to do a different editor experience inside of Hygraph by using
it's pretty intense and awesome.
I will also post in chat. Here's a YouTube video I created a while ago that is, it covers a lot of these basics again, but covers it by adding, again, the Tailwind classes to all of the rich text.
Exactly.
Which I was lazy today, and this is literally wrapped in the pros, right? So if we go to my layout, I've got, main class pros, right? So it does all that work for me. But if I wanted custom Tailwind classes for all of my rich text, that would be how I'd go about it.
Exactly. Awesome. So we are coming up on the hour. Oh, we are over the hour. Holy moly. We're 1 hour one. I think this was one that, for like, if you're like using stuff every day, this one is going to be one that at least would help me a lot. And I've been lazy and just used the HTML that comes out of Hygraph. And you know what? It's pretty decent HTML. I've had experiences with other CMSs that I won't name now, where the HTML that came out by default was horrible. So I've had to then do it. For now, it was actually decent. Anyways, we encourage you to try these things out. And if you have questions, you can actually follow us on Slack or join us here in the community. And Nimit, who was just in the chat, is now actually in Slack asking questions, which is awesome. And he will now come on the stream sometime soon to show what he's been working on.
A beautiful thing. I love that.
That's exactly, we love that stuff. And so lots of all of the things we've been discussing are actually written down by our lovely Romina on our docs page. And you can find a lot there. And if you don't find it, come back to Slack, ask us, and we either add it or we just help you right there. That tends to be what happens. So I'm going over all my CTAs.
Yes,
Bryan, do you want to do the sign up CTA? Here.
Sure.
We don't have one prepared.
So obviously, when you go to that link that Tim's showing right there at the bottom, right? apps.hygraph.com/sign up. One of the things you can also do is we have, let me share screen again real fast. Because
go.
Here's my problem. I just like talking with people. So let me pull that link up real fast. And you're going to see the absolute ridiculousness of my Hygraph.
Yeah, you have a lot of project, dude.
But you won't see any of this if you're signing up for the first time, but you will see this. So the data that I use today, if you're interested in playing around with that data, the basic blog starter here will give you everything you need for that. There's also a repo for using it in Next, which I'm going to convert to 11 because I'm like 3/4 of the way there after preparing for this. But you can see there's GitHub repo, there's Vercel deployment, and you just click add project and you get the data schema and you get all the content that was in this project already, and you can just start playing with it.
Yeah, so we have a ton of starters you can just click on and go. And it's all there. And they're from code, but also like Hygraph setups with all the schemas, models, content added already. It's all in there, right? So it's easy to get started.
We've got Hygraphlix, which is like a streaming platform that also includes like Mux and some other things going on. We've got Tim's skincare demo, which if you've been paying attention to this stream, you might have seen with Goth Skin last week, I think.
Last week, yeah, that was crazy.
Check YouTube. They're all there as well. But all of those are available inside of the app, and you can do that by signing up and checking them out.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Bryan.
Absolutely.
I forced you to do a CTA, but now maybe I don't force you. And like, do you have any last words?
Rich text is not HTML. It's data. Use it as data, use it as HTML, but know that you can do more. And I believe in you.
I love it. And that also makes me, I'm going to have to change my website because I use .html rather than the JSON and all this fun stuff.
I'll
So
be
I will
honest,
be doing
the
that.
Next.js starter that I talked about with the basic blog, it uses the HTML because it's
It's
something I didn't want to like
convenient,
dive
right?
into, but I might be
Exactly.
converting it soon.
We should probably.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if the HTML that comes out is good and it's not like weirdly opinionated or accessibility doesn't work, of course you can do it. But when you use Hygraph the way it's kind of meant to use at scale for your company, you're going to do this stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time. Happy coding. Cheers.